Mercedes shocked the grid on the first day back on the track in Bahrain. Lewis Hamilton led a Mercedes 1-2 in second practice for the 2024 Bahrain Grand Prix, and reigning Formula One world champion Max Verstappen finished over half a second behind and outside the top 5. Are Mercedes back? Let's find out what they have to say about the recent results and if we can expect Mercedes to be up front due to their rigorous overhaul of the car during the winter break. Temperatures were unsurprisingly lower in FP2, which took place in more typical circumstances for qualifying on Friday and the race on Saturday, than in first practice, but an air temperature of 17 degrees Celsius and a track temperature of 22 degrees Celsius were lower than average. That may have accounted for part of the gap between the pacer-setting Mercedes, tyre warm-up being one of its strengths in 2023, and the Red Bull, which suffered with warm-up last year. But Hamilton was still quickest by a significant margin on both of his qualifying simulation runs. His final time of 1m30, 174s gave him a 0.2 lead over teammate George Russell, who had been a second adrift after the first runs. The Red Bull's performance pattern, in which it lost around 0.3 seconds on the straights to the Mercedes, Ferraris and Astons, shows that it was running with a conservative power unit setting. In addition, Verstappen made a little mistake at the final corner on his fastest lap. Nonetheless, Mercedes was highly encouraged, with Lewis Hamilton, the FP2 pacer setter, saying, "The car felt good, but we can't get ahead of ourselves. We know there is more to extract and our long-run pace isn't in the fight with the Red Bulls." The long-run averages of the two Mercedes, Norris and Charles Leclerc's Ferrari were separated by hundredths, but during a single lap the hierarchy was clear. Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, with Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin trailing closely behind. While Mercedes surprised themselves with a 1-2 finish in the second Bahrain Grand Prix practice session, Lewis Hamilton warned that their race speed is nowhere near what Red Bull has. Lewis Hamilton remains skeptical of Red Bull despite Mercedes' exploits. Only after qualifying, we'll know if this shock Mercedes 1-2 was the precursor of a similarly impressive one-lap show, or if Red Bull is waiting to unleash the actual capability of the RB20. In any case, Hamilton feels Red Bull still has a significant advantage over the competition in terms of race distance performance. FP1, we were surprised. It was very windy this morning, so it was a really difficult session I think for everyone, Hamilton told Sky F1. The track was so different compared to last week. It was feeling okay, but we didn't really know where we stood on the C2 tyre. And then in this session, FP2, the car, we made some improvements over the session. It's a shock to see us where we are. We'll take it for now, but we can't get ahead of ourselves. We need to keep our heads down, keep working on the setup to try and extract more. I think our long-run pace is nowhere near the Red Bulls, for example, and I think we were a lot closer, so we've got some work to do there. Hamilton believes Verstappen will do his famous vanishing act out front on Grand Prix Saturday if he can escape any early hold-ups. He feels Mercedes is in a best-of-the-rest race with Ferrari, McLaren and Aston Martin. "I do," said Hamilton, when asked on whether he knows how to close the gap to Red Bull. "In terms of achieving that, I don't know how necessarily with a new car. With a new car, you have all new tools. Everything's been redesigned, and so all the previous numbers and names for things are completely shifted, so you're learning a whole new vocabulary when it comes to the car setup. And we've tested some of them, but not all of them, because we only had a day and a half, so we'll have to see. I hope that we can make a step. I've got a bit of an idea, but I don't know how to achieve that yet, currently with the setup changes without affecting the other side of things, single lap. I think we're going to be in the mix. I think it's a bit too early to say, but I think we're there or thereabouts with Ferrari and maybe Aston and McLaren. I don't know exactly where we lay with those guys, but we're around those, so it's going to close. A nice battle with us. I think if Max is in the front, he will veer off as he has done for the last couple of years." Hamilton had very little nice to say about Mercedes' prior ground effect competitors, but he delivered a considerably more flattering appraisal of the W15, stating that he is much happier with Mercedes' most recent development. "I'm much happier with the car this year," he added. "My seating position is finally further rearwards, so I've got a better feel for the car approaching the corners. But there are other areas that have been fixed and improved, and it just feels like a race car for once, and the last two cars didn't feel like that. So it's a really good platform for us to work on, and we've just got to keep our heads down and keep on chasing." Russell said practically the same and maintained calm after FP2 Bahrain GP, stating, "I mean, we can't get carried away with ourselves. The qualifying pace was really strong. We still need to try and understand why it was so good. We made some changes from the tests and it exceeded our expectations. But ultimately, the long-run pace, which is where it all happens, Max was still ahead of us. It was very close with Fernando, with Lando and the Ferraris, and Lewis and I were very similar as well. For Russell, the focus is elsewhere for now. 100%. We need to sit down and understand where this increased performance is, where it's come from, whether it's a one-off, whether we can maintain this. Andrew Chauvelin also chimed in on Mercedes' performances, stating, "Following the test, we were most concerned about our single lap pace. We had both drivers in the simulator before returning here. From the running today, it looks like we have improved. We're certainly not getting carried away, as there is plenty of scope within power unit modes and fuel loads for several cars to find a chunk of time before tomorrow. It's encouraging though that the picture we had last week seems to have improved. The long-run data also looks close. Verstappen is still comfortably out front as we saw last week, but behind him it's going to be a tight battle for the remaining podium spots. We know we've got plenty to fine-tune on the balance. It's still early days with the W15, and we're learning how to get lap time out of it with each run, but it's already feeling very different to the last 2 years that we have been here. Mercedes' main rival, Max Verstappen, however, thinks Mercedes have been pushing too hard, and has admitted he has yet to find the sweet spot with the Red Bull RB20 after failing to finish first in either practice session on day 1 of the Bahrain Grand Prix. The Milton Keynes-based team was expected to dominate alongside the Dutchman following last season and the pre-season test, and while that may still happen in qualifying and the race, Verstappen finished nearly half a tenth slower than Lewis Hamilton's fastest time for Mercedes in second practice at Bahrain International Circuit. With Verstappen in 6th place, qualifying seemed to be wide open, although Verstappen argued his day was not too bad. "It is very close," said the 3-time world champion. "Maybe some people around us have already turned up the engine a little bit, but we just focus on ourselves. There were a few little balance issues from front to rear, but nothing big. It is just about trying to find that sweet spot. Especially around here with the rough tarmac, once you get it into that sweet spot, you just pick up time. That's what we will try to focus on." After setting scorching times in race simulations, Verstappen said Red Bull was not too far away from the sweet spot, adding, "It is just trying to get into it and feel a little happier with the car. But at the end of the day, you just want to focus a bit on the long run because that's where the car really needs to work." Mercedes, Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso, Ferrari's Carlos Sainz, and McLaren's Oscar Piastri all finished ahead of Verstappen. When pressed to expand on his assertion that engines were cranked up for his opponents, he clarified, "I don't mean that everyone around us did that, but a few did. So I am not too worried about the gap to P1, for example, but I think it is going to be very close in qualifying, which will be very nice. The long run, I was a bit happier about that, but there are things we can do better." What are your thoughts? Is Mercedes a true challenger this year? Could they beat Red Bull? Could they provide Hamilton with his 8th title, or Russell his first? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.